Some men fall in love over candlelit dinners, or across crowded rooms at parties where the champagne costs more than most people's rent. This one fell in love through a wall, through 3 inches of plaster and old paint in the hallway of the Voss Institute of Performing Arts, while pretending to check his phone and listening to someone play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major so quietly, so haltingly, so imperfectly, that it became the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. And what made it madness, what made everyone around him later shake their heads and lower their voices, was that he already knew who she was before he ever heard her name. He knew she was engaged to another man. He knew her father had arranged it. He knew he had absolutely no business being anywhere near her. He walked into that institute 2 weeks later as a piano tutor named Mr. Cole. He was neither of those things. His real name was Julian Ashford, 34 years old. He ran Ashford Capital from the 51st floor of a glass tower in the financial district, where the air smelled like cold ambition and the coffee was always too hot to drink. He had built the firm from a seed investment and 12 years of decisions that other people called reckless and he called precise. He owned 3 properties, a collection of first edition books he never had time to read, and a reputation for being the most composed man in any room he entered. He had not cried since his mother's funeral. He had not been late to a single meeting in 4 years. He had not, until that Tuesday afternoon in the marble hallway of the Voss Institute, stood still for 7 consecutive minutes doing absolutely nothing. He had been there to meet a client, a film composer named Renata Voss, grandniece of the Institute's founder, who wanted Ashford Capital to manage a new arts endowment. The meeting had gone well. 40 minutes. A handshake. A signed letter of intent. He was walking back through the main corridor toward the exit when the music started. It came from behind a closed door marked Studio 4. It began mid-phrase, as though the player had been sitting at the keys for a long time before finally deciding to press one. Then another. The opening notes of the Nocturne arrived slowly, each one slightly separated from the last. The way someone speaks when they are choosing their words very carefully and know the wrong ones will cost them something. He stopped walking. He stood outside that door for 7 minutes. He counted later because counting was how he processed things he didn't understand. The playing was technically flawed. The left hand slightly behind the right. The pedaling too heavy in places. One repeated stumble on the same transition in the 3rd phrase. But underneath the imperfection was something he could not name and could not walk away from. An ache. A restraint. The sense of someone feeling something enormous and allowing only the very edges of it to show. The music stopped. He heard the soft sound of a piano bench shifting. He started walking again, faster than he'd arrived. That night, he looked up the Institute's current roster of private students. It took his assistant Marcus 40 minutes and a politely worded inquiry through a mutual contact. The answer came back with a name, a photograph, and enough background information that Julian sat at his kitchen counter with a glass of water and read it twice. Slowly, the ice melted. He didn't notice. Her name was Nadia Verne, 26 years old. Her father was Edouard Verne, founder of Verne Group, a real estate and development conglomerate worth hundreds of millions. Nadia attended private piano lessons at the Voss Institute every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. She had no social media presence beyond a private account with fewer than 40 followers. She did not appear in any of the society photographs that featured her father at charity galas and ribbon cuttings. She had a degree in art history from a university she had transferred to twice. And she had, 3 months ago, been formally engaged to a man named Christoph Bauer, the only son of Henrik Bauer, whose construction company had been Verne Group's primary contractor for 11 years. Julian found the announcement in the business section of a financial journal, buried beneath a paragraph about a joint development project. The union of the Verne and Bauer families would consolidate land rights over a coastal development zone worth close to $1 billion. Nadia was the price. He closed his laptop. He poured the water down the sink. He stood in his kitchen for a long time looking at nothing. He was not a man who acted on feeling. He was a man who acted on information, on timing, on the careful measurement of risk against return. He knew the difference between a sound investment and a sentimental one. He also knew that the woman behind the door of Studio 4 had played Chopin the way people pray when they think no one is listening. He tried to forget it. For 9 days he tried. On the 10th day he called Renata Voss. The cover story was simple because the simplest ones hold longest. Renata owed Julian a favor. He had connected her with a tax attorney who had saved the Institute's endowment from a structuring error that could have cost them their nonprofit status. When he called and explained that he had a personal interest in quietly auditing the Institute's private tutoring program, quality control, he said, for a potential philanthropic contribution, Renata listened without interrupting and agreed without asking too many questions. She was a practical woman who understood that people in Julian's position always had reasons they preferred not to explain. She introduced him to the staff as Mr. Cole, a pianist and arts consultant sitting in on select lessons as part of a curriculum review. Julian had played piano for 11 years as a child. He had stopped at 17, when his father's business collapsed and the upright Yamaha in their living room was the fourth thing to be sold. He hadn't touched a piano since. He spent the 3 days before his first session practicing scales in his spare bedroom with the curtains drawn, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertain. He arrived at Studio 4 on a Thursday at 2:45. He sat in the observation chair in the corner, a low wooden chair clearly designed to be uncomfortable and unobtrusive. He had a notepad on his knee. He kept his eyes on it for the first 90 seconds after she walked in. Nadia Verne was small in the way that made rooms seem larger around her. She wore a dark green coat that she folded carefully over the back of the piano bench before sitting down. Her hair was pulled up loosely, a few dark strands falling past her jaw. She set her music folder on the stand, smoothed the pages with 2 fingers, and then sat very still for a moment with her hands in her lap, looking at the keys. Not at the music, at the keys themselves, as though she was having a conversation with them that had started before she arrived. She was working on the same Chopin nocturne he had heard through the wall. Up close, the imperfections were clearer and the emotion underneath them was more devastating. She played the difficult transition 3 times in a row without being asked to, each attempt slightly different. Her brow furrowing with a concentration that was entirely internal, entirely her own. Her regular tutor, Mr. Adeyemi, said gently, "Better. Let your wrist lead." She tried again. Her wrist led. The phrase opened up like a window being unlatched. She exhaled, barely audible. Julian heard it from across the room. He wrote nothing in his notepad for 37 minutes. At the end of the session, when she stood and folded her coat back over her arm, she glanced toward the corner where he sat. Their eyes met for 2 seconds. She looked away first. He looked away second. His pen had left a small ink mark on the page where he had been pressing it without writing anything. He came back Tuesday. He came back Thursday. His friend Thomas Park came by his apartment on a Friday evening and found him sitting at his kitchen island with a Chopin nocturne playing from the speakers and a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "You look like someone ran over your car," Thomas said, helping himself to the refrigerator. "I'm fine. You're playing Chopin. You hate Chopin." "I don't hate Chopin. You once described Chopin as emotionally incontinent." Julian picked up the coffee. It was cold. He set it down. Thomas pulled a stool to the other side of the island and looked at him with the patient, exasperating expression of someone who had watched Julian Ashford solve every problem except the ones that actually mattered. "Tell me," Thomas said. So Julian told him. Not all of it. Not the part about standing outside a door for 7 minutes counting seconds. But enough. The institute, the observation sessions, the engagement, the father, the development deal worth close to $1 billion. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, "So she's engaged?" "Yes." "And her father arranged it?" "Yes." "And you've been watching her play piano twice a week for 3 weeks?" "I'm auditing the program." "Julian." "What?" "You don't audit things. You acquire them." Thomas leaned back. "What is it about her specifically? And don't tell me it's the music." Julian looked at the window. The city glittered below in the particular way it did on cold evenings. Every light a little sharper than it needed to be. "She plays like she's the only person in the room," he said finally. "Like no one is watching and it doesn't matter either way. Like the music is something she's working out between herself and God. and she's not sure either of them is going to like the answer. He paused. I've never seen anyone do anything that way. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. You're in trouble. I'm aware. The father's going to be a problem. I'm aware of that too. And the fiancé. The fiancé, Julian said, is a clause in a business contract. I've read worse ones. It was Renata who opened the next door, which Julian had not planned for. Mr. Adeyemi had a family matter requiring him to travel for 3 weeks. The institute needed a temporary replacement for his 4 private students. Renata mentioned this to Julian after a board meeting, in the same offhand way she mentioned most things, and then watched his face with eyes considerably more perceptive than they appeared. You play, she said. It was not a question. I used to. Used to is enough for 3 weeks. She handed him a folder. The last student is complicated. She's good enough that she knows when she's being managed. Don't manage her. Just listen. Julian took the folder. He knew without opening it which name was at the top of the last page. He spent that weekend relearning things his hands had forgotten. His fingers were slower than they'd been at 17. Stiffer. He made mistakes that would have embarrassed him as a boy. He made them again and again until the muscle memory came back like something surfacing from very cold water. Gradual, then sudden, then simply there. He walked into studio for the following Tuesday as Mr. Cole, piano tutor, and sat on the stool beside the bench instead of the chair in the corner. Nadia looked at the stool, then at him. Where's Mr. Adeyemi? Family matter. He'll be back in 3 weeks. I'm covering. She gave him a direct, unhurried assessment that lasted long enough to be uncomfortable. He held it. You were in the corner, she said. Before. I was observing. And now you're here. Now I'm here. He gestured toward the piano. Whenever you're ready. She stumbled on the transition, the same one, the same place in the third phrase. He let her try it twice without speaking. On the third attempt he said quietly, You're thinking about the note you're going to rather than the one you're leaving. Play the C like it matters. She stopped. She played the C alone. Held it. Let it decay. Then moved to the E. The transition opened up like something that had been waiting a long time to be released. Again, he said. She played the phrase from the beginning. The transition was not perfect. But it was no longer a stumble. It was a decision. She played it 3 more times without being asked. You play like you're apologizing for something, he said. Don't apologize. Chopin didn't apologize. She stopped playing. Her hands came to rest in her lap. She turned to look at him fully for the first time that session. And what he saw in her face was not offense. It was the expression of someone who has just heard something true said aloud that they had never given themselves permission to think. That's not a very kind thing to say to someone, she said. It's not meant to be unkind. It's meant to be useful. There's a difference? Yes. He held her gaze. One of them serves you. She looked at him for another moment. Then she turned back to the piano. Again, she said. To herself. Not to him. He sat very still while she played. And he understood, somewhere below the level of thought, that he had completely miscalculated what this was going to cost him. The second session was quieter. She arrived exactly on time, sat without preamble, and played through the nocturne from beginning to end without stopping. A choice, he realized, to show him what she already had before he told her what she lacked. He said nothing until she finished. You've been practicing. I practice every day. It shows. The third phrase is cleaner. She turned to look at him. You're surprised. I'm not surprised. He searched for the word. Pleased. Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. The thing that lives just before a smile, when the decision hasn't been made yet. They worked on the final movement. Quieter, more internal than the opening. The left hand a slow heartbeat beneath the right hand's melody. He asked her what she heard in it. She said she didn't know. He said that was fine. She didn't have to know in words. She just had to feel it and then choose whether to show it or protect it. That's always the choice, he said. In music and in everything else. She played the passage again. This time she chose to show it. He felt the shift from across the bench. The room seemed to change temperature. He made himself look at his notepad. By the third session they were talking. Not about music exclusively. It happened the way things happen when two people are sitting close together in a quiet room doing something that requires honesty. The conversation expanded because the music made the walls thinner. She asked why he had stopped playing. He said he had come to music late, from a family that didn't have it, and had lost access before he could go anywhere with it. She said she understood something about losing access to things. My father believes that the things you love should be useful, she said. Piano is not useful. I am allowed to love it as long as it doesn't interfere with the things he has decided are important. She paused. These sessions are the 2 hours a week. I am not required to be useful. Julian looked at her profile. She was looking at the window, tall, north-facing, filling the room with the gray-white light of a November afternoon. Her jaw was set in the way of someone who has said something they meant and is waiting to see whether the other person treats it carefully. Then we won't waste them, he said. She turned to look at him. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough for something to shift in the room between them. Something quiet and irreversible, like the moment a key turns in a lock and you realize the door has been open the whole time. No, she agreed. We won't. He began to learn her the way you learn music, through repetition, through attention, through the accumulation of details that only reveal their meaning over time. She wore a thin silver bracelet on her left wrist every session. A child's bracelet, too small for her now, that she touched absently when she was thinking. She brought tea from home in a thermos and never offered to share, not out of unfriendliness but because she had learned, apparently, not to presume anyone wanted what she had. She was funnier than she appeared, dry, quick, the humor surfacing in unguarded moments and retreating before it could be remarked upon. She was engaged to a man she never mentioned unless Julian asked directly. And when she did, it was with the careful neutrality of someone describing a clause in a contract. On the 4th session she arrived late. Flushed, coat not fully buttoned. She sat down without apology and opened her folder. Then she stopped. I need a moment, she said. Take it. She took 3 measured breaths. Outside the window a pigeon landed on the sill and immediately left. My father had a dinner last night, she said. For Christoph's family. He announced a date. She said it without inflection, which was worse than despair. She had already processed it. She had arrived at the stage where she described it the way she described weather. 8 months, she said. He's given us 8 months. Julian kept his voice even. And what do you want? She looked at him. The question seemed to arrive somewhere it hadn't been expected. That's not a question my father asks. I know. I'm asking it. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that the November light shifted slightly in the room. I want to play the nocturne through without stopping, she said finally. Just once. All the way, without stopping, without thinking about what comes after it. Then play it. She turned to the piano. She played it from the first note to the last without stopping. It was not perfect, but it was whole, and it was hers. And when the final chord decayed into the silence of the room, she sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed and simply breathed. He did not speak. He did not write anything in the notepad. He sat beside her and let the silence be what it was. Not empty, not uncomfortable. Full, the way rooms are full after music has stopped and the sound is still living somewhere in the walls. Again, she said softly. He smiled. Again. Mr. Adeyemi returned on a Wednesday. Julian went to the institute the following day, not as a tutor, not with any pretext he had prepared in advance, just as a man who needed to say something before the door closed permanently. He waited in the hallway outside Studio 4. He heard Mr. Adeyemi's voice inside, gentle and familiar. He heard Nadia's piano, the Chopin nocturne playing almost correctly now. The transition smooth, the final movement unhurried and unafraid. He stood outside that door and listened the way he had stood there the very first time. Except now he knew whose hands were on the keys, and what it cost her to be in that room twice a week pretending that 2 hours was enough. The session ended. The door opened. Mr. Adeyemi emerged, greeted Julian warmly, and, with the tact of someone who understood the texture of a room, excused himself quietly to the staff office. Nadia stood in the corridor with her coat folded over her arm and her music folder pressed against her chest. She looked at Julian with an expression he had not seen on her before. Rawer than her careful first-day assessment. Rawer than her private concentration at the bench. The look of someone who had been expecting something and is not sure whether to be relieved or frightened that it finally arrived. "You're not Mr. Cole," she said. Not a question. "No. Who are you?" He told her everything. His name, his firm, the hallway, the 7 minutes, the cover story, the 3 weeks. He told it plainly, without softening the parts that reflected poorly on him, because she had spent a lifetime surrounded by men who softened things for their own convenience, and he was not willing to be one of them. He watched her face while he spoke. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then, "You stood outside that door and listened to me." "Yes." "For 7 minutes." "Yes." "And then you lied to be in the room with me." "Yes." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to tell you it was the right thing to do, but I am going to tell you it was the only thing I could think of. And I've been thinking very clearly for a very long time. This is the first time in years that I couldn't." She looked at him. "You had no right." "You're correct. And you know about Christoph?" "Yes." "And my father?" "Yes." She looked away, down the corridor toward the institute's entrance, where the afternoon light came through the glass doors in long pale rectangles on the floor. Then she said, without looking at him, "Why did you stay? After the first session. You could have left." He had considered this question many times before without arriving at an answer that felt adequate. "Because you told the piano something true," he said. "And I haven't heard anyone tell anything the truth in a long time." The corridor was quiet. Somewhere deeper in the institute a student worked through scales, patient, mechanical, unhurried. Nadia looked down at the bracelet on her wrist and touched it with 2 fingers the way she did when she was deciding something. "My mother gave me this when I was 7, she said. "She died when I was 9. My father kept everything she owned except this because it wasn't worth anything." She looked up at Julian. "I wear it every day." He understood that this was not a change of subject. It was the truest thing she had said to him, said deliberately, and she was watching to see what he did with it. "I know," he said. "I've noticed it every session." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, "I'm going to be very late for something." "I know. And I'm engaged." "I know that too." "Then what exactly are you asking?" "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I'm standing in a hallway telling you the truth. That's all." She looked at him one more time. Then she walked toward the exit. At the glass doors she paused. She did not turn around. "The institute has open practice rooms on Saturday mornings," she said. "Free to use. Unsupervised." She pushed through the doors and was gone. Julian stood in the corridor for 63 seconds. His pulse was doing something it had not done in years. He pressed 2 fingers to his wrist and counted. It was not useful information. He counted anyway. He was there at 9 the following Saturday. She arrived at 9:14 in a dark blue coat slightly too large, the kind that belongs to a person rather than an outfit. She had her thermos and her music folder. She stopped in the doorway of practice room 2 when she saw him already at the piano bench. Then she came in without speaking and sat in the chair across from the instrument. "You came," she said. "You told me about the room. I told you the room existed. I didn't tell you to come." "No," he agreed. "You didn't." She poured tea from her thermos. Then, after a pause, held the cup out toward him. He took it. She poured a second for herself. He understood what that meant and said nothing about it. "Play something," she said. "I'm not here to perform." "Neither am I." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Play something. I want to hear what you sound like when no one is evaluating you." He turned to the piano. He played the only thing that had been living in his hands lately, the opening of the Nocturne in E-flat major. The one she had been working on for 8 months. The one he had heard through a wall and not been able to forget. He did not play it well. His left hand was too heavy. His tempo uneven. He played it the way she had played it the first time he ever heard her. Slowly, imperfectly, with the ache showing through every gap in the technique. When he finished, she was looking at him differently. "You learned it," she said. "I've been listening to it for weeks. You learned my piece." "I suppose I did." She set down her cup. She came and sat beside him on the bench. He shifted to make room. Their shoulders were 3 inches apart. She placed her hands on the keys. "I'll play the melody," she said. "You take the left hand." They played it together, imperfectly, unevenly, with 2 sets of mistakes that didn't quite cancel each other out but somehow made the whole thing more honest than either of them could have made it alone. Her right hand and his left. Her tempo and his following it. When they reached the difficult transition, they stumbled together, stopped, started again. This time it held. They played the nocturne from beginning to end. When it ended, neither of them moved. Her hands were still on the keys. His left hand 3 inches from her right. He could feel the warmth of her without touching her. The room held the last chord longer than it should have been possible. "Nadia," he said. "Don't," she said softly, not sharply, not defensively. "The way you say don't when you mean not yet. I'm not ready for what comes after that." "Okay," he said. She took a slow breath. "My father is going to find out you were here. He finds out everything." She looked at the piano. "And when he does, he won't just come for me. He'll come for you. He's done it before to people who had much less to lose than you." "He can try," Julian said quietly. She turned to look at him. "You don't understand what he's capable of. I've read his business record going back 14 years. I know exactly what he's capable of." He met her eyes. "I've also read the Bauer contract, the development consolidation, the coastal zone rights. I know what you're worth to him in that arrangement. And I know it has nothing to do with you." Her jaw tightened. "That's not a comfortable thing to hear said out loud." "No, but it's the truth. And you deserve to hear it from someone who isn't going to profit from your silence." She was quiet for a long time. Outside the practice room window, the city moved on with its Saturday business. Unhurried, indifferent, unaware. "What do you want?" she asked finally. Simply, without the music and the hallway and the cover story. "What is it you actually want?" He looked at her steadily. "I want you to have someone in your corner. That's all." "That's not all." "No," he admitted. "It's not all. But it's where I'm starting from." She looked at the piano. She lifted her hands and set them back on the keys without pressing any of them. "Saturday mornings," she said quietly. 9 to 11. That's what I have. Then I'll be here at 9. Every Saturday. Every Saturday." She pressed a single key, middle C, held it, let it decay into the room's silence. Then she turned a page in her music folder. "From the beginning," she said. He put his left hand on the bass. "From the beginning." Edouard Verne found out on a Tuesday. He always moved on Tuesdays. His assistant had once told someone that Edouard chose Tuesdays for important actions because it was the day most people underestimated. Julian's firm received a call from Verne Group's legal office at 9 in the morning requesting an urgent meeting. Julian had his own legal team pull every relevant file before noon. He arrived at the meeting early. He sat in a chair that faced the door. He waited with the particular stillness of a man who has decided that the only way through something is directly through it. Edouard Verne was 61 years old, silver-haired, built like a man who had decided decades ago that warmth was a liability he couldn't afford. He walked into the conference room with 2 lawyers and the air of someone who had never arrived anywhere second. He looked at Julian across the table with the specific displeasure of a man who believed that other people's desires were nothing more than administrative inconveniences. "Mr. Ashford," he said, "I'll be direct." "Please," Julian said. "My daughter is engaged to be married. It is a formal arrangement that serves both families and has been agreed upon by all relevant parties." He paused. "You have been spending unsanctioned time with her under a false identity. I am here to ensure that ends today." Julian let the statement settle before responding. "Your daughter," he said, "is 26 years old. She is not a minor." The time she spends at the Voss Institute falls entirely within her rights as a consenting adult. He held Edouard's gaze. And I'd point out that the engagement you're describing was not agreed upon by all relevant parties. Because your daughter did not choose it. The room went very quiet. One of Edouard's lawyers shifted almost imperceptibly in his chair. Edouard's voice dropped. Not in volume. In temperature. You will stay away from her. I will not, Julien said. Without heat. Without aggression. With the same precision he brought to every negotiation that mattered to him. What I will do is tell you clearly. I intend to pursue a relationship with your daughter. Honestly. Openly. With her consent and on her timeline. If she chooses the arrangement you've made for her, I will accept that completely. But I will not accept being removed from the equation before she has the chance to choose. I could make things very difficult for your firm. You could try. Julien said it without blinking. I'm also aware that the Bauer development consolidation requires 3 additional regulatory approvals that are currently pending. Approvals that pass through committees that include people I have known for many years. He said it quietly, slowly, one word at a time. I'm not threatening you, Mr. Verne. I'm explaining that this is not a situation where one party holds all the leverage. Edouard sat very still. It was the first moment in the meeting that he had not been controlling the pace. He looked at Julien the way men look at things they have underestimated and will not underestimate again. What exactly do you want? He asked. I want her to be allowed to choose, Julien said. That is all. Nothing more and nothing less. If she chooses Christoph Bauer of her own free will, you will never see me again. But she has to be allowed to choose. The meeting ended 20 minutes later without resolution and without agreement. But Edouard Verne left the room in a different order than he had entered it. Lawyers first. Then him. Julien noticed. Nadia called on a Wednesday evening from a number he didn't recognize. She had used a different phone. He answered on the second ring. Her voice was even, but he had been listening to her closely enough and long enough to hear the controlled quality running underneath it like a current beneath still water. He told me about the meeting, she said. I expected he would. He told me what you said, about letting me choose. A pause. He's cancelled the institute, the sessions, the practice rooms, all of it. And he's moved the engagement party to next month. Julien's jaw tightened. He kept his voice even. Nadia, what do you want to do? Silence. Long enough that he thought the call had dropped. Then, I want to ask you something first. Ask. The Chopin. When you played it in the practice room that Saturday, was that for me? Or was that simply the only piece you knew? He was quiet for a moment. It was the piece I knew, he said. Because it was yours. I learned it because it was yours. Another silence. Then, very quietly, I'm going to need more than Saturday mornings. Yes. And I'm going to need someone who doesn't manage things for his own convenience. I know. I haven't always given you reason to believe that about me. No. But you told my father the truth when you didn't have to. And you told me the truth in the hallway when you could have kept the cover story running, and I never would have known the difference. Her voice steadied. My mother used to say that the only real thing about a person is what they do when the story they've been telling finally runs out. He said nothing. He let that sit the way she had taught him to let silences sit. Not empty, not uncomfortable. Full. I'm going to tell Christoph, she said. Before the party. He deserves to hear it from me directly. Not through lawyers, not through our fathers. A pause. And then I'm going to have a conversation with my father that is going to be very unpleasant. Do you want me there for it? No. This part one need to do for myself. He heard her take a slow breath. But afterward, yes. After that, I would like you to be there. I will be, he said. Wherever there is. She met with Christoph Bauer on a Thursday afternoon in the lobby of the hotel where his family had been staying. She told him that she had not chosen this. That she did not believe he had truly chosen it either. That the arrangement had always been between their fathers and the two of them had simply been placed inside it afterward and told that it was their future. She told him she was sorry. She told him she thought he deserved better than someone who had agreed without meaning to. Christoph listened to all of it without interrupting. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My father's going to be furious." And then, more quietly, almost to himself, "But I think you're right." He stood. He shook her hand. He left. She called Julian from the hotel lobby. Her voice was quieter than usual but steadier than it had been in weeks. "He took it better than I expected," she said. "He's a sensible man. My father will not be sensible. No, he won't. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready for that since the meeting." A pause. Then, "Julian." "Yes. I'm going to play the nocturne tonight. From beginning to end. By myself. On the old upright in the sitting room that my father thinks is taking up space." Her voice softened then. Just slightly, the restraint releasing by one quiet degree. "And I'm going to play it like I'm not apologizing for a single note." He felt something move through his chest. Large and warm and impossible to name properly. "Play it loud," he said. "I intend to." Edouard Verne did not take it quietly. He called Nadia 47 times between Thursday evening and Friday afternoon. She answered 3 of them. In the third call he said things she had heard before in different forms, variations on the long theme of disappointment, of ingratitude, of the particular injury that daughters inflict when they refuse to remain the shape their fathers built for them. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "I understand that you're angry, and I understand that this costs you something real. But it is my life, father. It was always my life. You borrowed it for a while, and now I need it back." He said she was throwing away everything he had sacrificed for her. She said she was choosing what to build for herself. He said she would regret it for the rest of her life. She said very quietly, "Maybe, but it will be my regret, not yours." He hung up. He called his lawyers. He called the Bowers. He spent an entire Friday attempting to reassemble the pieces of an arrangement that had already decided to come apart without him. The Bowers, for their part, had grown considerably less enthusiastic. Christoph's account of his conversation with Nadia had reached his father by Thursday night, and Henrik Bauer was a practical man who understood that a reluctant bride was a liability, and that the coastal development project had other paths that didn't require a human transaction at its foundation. By Friday afternoon, the Bauer family's position had shifted entirely. By Saturday morning, the engagement was formally dissolved. Julian was at his apartment when she arrived, unannounced. He answered the door in a shirt not quite fully tucked in, with the expression of a man who had spent the previous 12 hours telling himself very firmly to be patient and had not entirely succeeded. She was wearing the dark blue coat, the silver bracelet, her music folder under one arm. "It's over," she said. "The engagement. My father it's going to take time with him. But it's over." He stepped back from the door. "Come in." She came in. She looked around his apartment with the particular attention she gave to everything, examining the space the way she examined a new piece of music, looking for what it was really saying underneath the surface. The first edition books on the shelf, the coffee going cold on the counter, the piano in the corner, a baby grand, lid open, winter light falling across the keys. She walked toward it the way she always walked toward a piano, quietly, with gravity, as though the instrument had sent for her specifically and she was simply arriving on time. "You have a Steinway," she said. "It's been in storage. I had it delivered recently." "Recently?" She looked at him. "How recently?" 3 weeks ago." She understood what that meant. He watched her understand it. She set her music folder on the bench and ran her fingertips along the keys without pressing any of them, the way she did when she was deciding something important. Then she turned to face him fully. "I want to tell you something," she said, "before any of the rest of it." "Tell me." "The first session, when you said I played like I was apologizing." A ghost of a smile moved across her face. "I was furious. I went home and I played that phrase 40 times and I was furious every single time." She paused. "And then on the 41st time I stopped apologizing and the phrase opened up and I thought, whatever else this man is, he told me something true. It's the only thing I know how to do reliably," he said. "I know. It's alarming." The smile came fully then. Sudden, unguarded. the thing he had watched approach from a distance for weeks and had never been permitted to see arrive. It was worth every minute of every Tuesday and every Thursday and every Saturday morning. "I'm not easy," she said. "My father has made me careful. And careful people are not easy to be close to." "I don't want easy," Julian said. "I want true." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the piano, sat on the bench, and opened her music folder to the nocturne. She positioned her hands. "Sit down," she said. "Left hand." He sat beside her. His left hand found the bass. They played it from the very beginning. Not perfectly, not without the moments that required stopping and returning and trying again from the top. But they played it together. Her right hand and his left. Her tempo and his following it without hesitation. And when they reached the difficult transition, it held. Completely. And when they reached the final passage, the quiet one, the internal one, the one she had played on the afternoon she first told him about the 8 months, she played it without apology. Without the careful management of how much of herself she was permitted to show. She played it as though the room were full of people and it didn't matter at all. The last chord decayed into the apartment's silence. Neither of them moved. Her hands rested on the keys. His left hand 3 inches from her right. The winter light came through the tall windows and caught the silver bracelet on her wrist and turned it, for just a moment, into something that looked like gold. "Nadia," he said. This time she didn't say don't. "There is a photograph on the piano now. Not a professional photograph, no careful lighting, no composed expression, no one looking at the camera. Someone took it quickly, without asking, and what it captured was not a moment that was meant to be preserved. A Saturday morning in February. Early light. The kind that arrives sideways and touches everything it finds with the same patient gentleness. 2 people at a piano bench. Her hands on the keys. His left hand beside her right. Both of them looking at the music. Not at each other. Not at whoever is standing in the doorway. At the music. As though it is something they are still working out together, and they are very nearly there, and neither of them wants to look away from it yet. The photograph was taken by Thomas Park. He had let himself in with the spare key Julian had given him 4 years ago and never once needed until that February morning. He stood in the doorway for 30 seconds. Then he took the photograph without saying a word and let himself quietly back out and sent it to Julian's phone from the street below with a message that said only, "You were right." It wasn't sentimental. Edouard Verne and Julian Ashford did not become allies. They did not arrive at warmth or ease or anything resembling friendship. What they arrived at, over the better part of a year, was a careful and honest mutual understanding. The kind that forms between 2 people who are both too intelligent and too stubborn to pretend the other doesn't matter. Edouard loved his daughter. He loved her the way men love when they have confused protection with possession for so long that they can no longer tell the two apart. He came, slowly and with considerable difficulty, to understand that the woman his daughter was becoming was not a departure from the daughter he had known. She was the full version of her. Unedited, unmanaged, finally allowed to take up all the space she had always deserved. He was not comfortable with this, but he was learning. Christoph Bauer married an architect from Geneva 2 years later. The coastal development project proceeded under a restructured partnership that turned out, in the end, to be considerably more profitable than the original arrangement. Henrik Bauer sent Julian a bottle of wine at the New Year with no note attached, which Julian interpreted as a truce and accepted without comment. Nadia returned to the Voss Institute on a Thursday morning in early spring. She worked on a new piece, a Schubert impromptu, difficult in different ways than the Chopin, requiring a different kind of courage in different places. She played it without apologizing for any of it. The nocturne she kept for Saturday mornings. Julian learned it properly over the following 4 months. His left hand was slower than he wanted it to be. His technique uneven in the places that Nadia found genuinely irksome and said so without softening it. He played the difficult passages 40 times in a row on the mornings she wasn't there. On the 41st attempt she said, "There," just that one word. And he understood exactly what she meant because she had told him once about her own 41st attempt, quietly and without ceremony, and he had been paying attention. They played it together on a Saturday morning in late spring. Her right hand and his left. The difficult transition smooth now, the two hands moving together as though they had been doing it for years, which in a sense they had. The final passage played all the way through, completely without stopping. The apartment held the last chord in its walls for a moment longer than seemed physically possible. Outside the windows the city moved through its brilliant indifferent Saturday, a million lives proceeding in every direction at once, none of them aware of this particular room or what was happening inside it. Inside the room 2 people sat at a piano bench in the morning light with their hands very close together and said nothing at all. There are things that don't require words. Music has always known this. People learn it too, eventually, when they have finally stopped apologizing for what they feel and decided to let it be exactly as large as it actually is. On the bench beside them, her music folder lay open to the nocturne. The pages worn at the edges now from months of use. The margins filled with small careful notes in 2 different handwritings. Hers in neat deliberate print. His in the narrow precise script of a man who had spent his life writing things that mattered and had only recently started writing things that mattered differently. The note said things like breathe here and don't rush the sea and let the left hand land softly and, in one margin near the top of the very last page, in his handwriting, 2 words she had read every Saturday morning for months and had never once considered erasing. No apologies. The silver bracelet caught the morning light the way it always did. The spring air moved through the open window. The last chord lived quietly in the walls for one moment longer. Then she turned the page. If the story moved something in you, share it with someone special. Leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you longest. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Every story we tell is for the people who have never stopped listening.